Good morning. Change of scene. I cannot be in my snug. I can't. It is so dirty. I just actually can't look at it anymore. So I'm going here. Shut the door. Not looking. Bridget Phillipson. What an absolute waste of space. So you will now know that the podcast I did was unscripted with Spencer Lodge. The link will be in this. It was the first interview I'd done in a long time, so we covered lots of things, but we got to the crux, which was why I'm so passionate about education. And as I was watching it yesterday, it struck me that here's me talking about these big hitters, you know, all of your Rachel Reeves, your Bridget Phillipson, your Keir Starmers. And I literally have been doing a lot of it from my kitchen sink, my kitchen table, or sitting in my dirty dog-infested snug. My credentials for doing this are I'm a mother, I'm extremely passionate. I do have a psychological understanding of how people work. I did run a Montessori preschool. I am a journalist by trade, and I see things, not like clairvoyant Mystic Meg stuff, but I see, because I guess I'm neurodivergent, but maybe just because I'm just me, and maybe we all see it and nobody else is calling it out. So they're my qualifications and credentials. And what's Bridget Phillipson got? A life of being a Labour Party member. Now, I'm not saying that she hasn't had life along the way. We all know that she has had life along the way, but it's been within that tight bubble of Bridget Phillipson's Labour Party membership. And so her qualifications for education and children are her own education and her own children. And whilst mine are my own children and my education, they are also interwoven with learning to be a counsellor, training to be a counsellor, having to go on the neurodivergent journey that I've been on with my daughter and myself, having to fight the system, which I've had to do, having to, when I ran my Montessori school, having to understand that each child is an individual. It is not the same as the one sitting next to it or the one opposite it. Even identical twins, they may look the same, they're different because we all have a different DNA. And I've learnt from that you cannot therefore treat all children as equal, the same, because equal is a stupid word when we're talking about things that aren't equal, but their inequalities aren't necessarily bad. So it's not always a bad thing not to be equal to somebody else. I am a woman. There are female murderers out there. We are women. We are equal that we are women. I am not a murderer, and I am very pleased about that. So in this podcast, I'm looking and listening, and there's areas where I feel as though I could have been a bit more polished, and areas where, you know, you critique yourself, don't you? But the overriding thing I felt as I walked away from it was I'm proud that I said it, that I told Bridget Phillipson in no uncertain terms that I don't agree with her policies, that I can't stand by and let her wantonly vandalise education. So imagine my joy when we have another Phillipson tweet, and she's going on, here we go, I have to find the specs and the mirror. She's going on about what she's done in education, and it's extraordinary that she does that. We've spent our first year fixing the foundations in schools, turning the tide on attendance and teacher recruitment. Now I'm turning to the thorny generational issue of our time, like driving up educational outcomes for white working class children. Where have you been, Bridget? Where have you been? And I put this on a backdrop of a job advert that somebody sent me today, Transport for London internship. What you'll need to apply for a Transport for London internship is you must be of Black, Asian and minority ethnic background, defined as having some African, Afro-Caribbean, Asian or other non-white heritage. So for a start, my entire stance on this is if you want to go for an internship at Transport for London, you need to be the best qualified applicant. Simple. You could be an alien as far as I'm concerned, but if you are the best one for the job, then you get it. So that's my first irritation with all of this. And it just, to me, is so simple. If you are good at your job, you get the job. We've talked about this, meritocracy in the civil service, and how you may only be now a civil servant from 2026, I think it is, if you come from a working class background. Okay, so we need the Oxford English definition of working class so that we all know what we're working towards. So that's one irritation. And then we talk about the attainment goals. So she talks about she's fixed attendance. Well, she hasn't fixed attendance. What she's done is fudge attendance and introduce detention clubs. So if you're faced, as a parent, if you're faced with a hefty fine or possible imprisonment if your child doesn't go to school, even if they have some kind of, well, I've got to be careful with my words here, because for me, for a child that didn't want to go to school, it was trauma-based. So I'm going to call it some kind of trauma-based reason why they cannot go to school, which affects a lot of children, then putting them in a detention club solves what? And fining or imprisoning their parents solves what? Now, a lot of these children don't want to go to school because they're scared of being stabbed, or they're scared of being bullied or abused. And ever was thus, stabbed not, bullied or abused ever was, but that's getting worse and worse and worse as generations go on. Much of it is online driven, but we're not banning phones in schools, because Bridget Phillipson says that's not a good idea because the Conservatives came up for it. So we're not fixing attendance. What we're doing is fixing fines. And then she talks about teachers. Now, hang on a minute. More teachers left the profession last year than ever before. The 6,000 new teachers, 6,500 new teachers that Bridget Phillipson promised in the VAT on education raid haven't materialised. Why not? Because there was no money, and because people don't want to go into the profession, because the profession, as the unions are telling us, does not look after itself. It does not look after teachers. It is not looking after the welfare and the best outcome of teachers. It's looking after government stats. And we all know that's really boring, and nobody wants to look after government stats. They just want to get on with their lives and their jobs. So that's another load of bollocks that she's going on about. Then we are claiming to care about the white working class children, but we don't seem to be working with Sadiq Khan, do we? Who in Transport for London is asking certain demographics to apply for certain jobs, but they're not white working class kids, are they? Now, this is something that has been rumbling for decades. This is not new. And my issue with this is, and you may turn around and throw whatever you want to, or I'm being very liberal, blah, 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 don't care. My issue is Bridget Phillipson says she cares for all children's educational outcomes. Unless, of course, you're in the 7% that go to the independent sector, and unless, of course, you're not white, because now we're focusing on white children. And this is where Bridget and all of her other stupid cronies get it wrong. They put us all in these little drawers, in these little pigeonholes of demographic, because they're so obsessed with demographic, because they're so obsessed about where they felt they weren't in the right one. You and I, we just want to work, we just want to earn a living, we just want to have a family life, we just want the best outcome. It would be really, really lovely if when we leave this mortal world, we leave something for our families and our children and all our best mates. You know, it would be nice if we could leave something that helps them along the way, but not them. They want you to go out as you came in, perhaps a bit poorer, and because it wasn't all right for them, it can't be all right for you. And I say this repeatedly, but we keep coming back to this. Their mental health is screwed. It is their own sense of injustice, their own trauma of what happened in their childhood that they are playing out on you and me. I would rather not pay 20% on education, but pay for Bridget to have some counselling. Because I think on the other side of it, she might come out of this with a bit of a different stance and go, oh, all children means all. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what colour skin you are. It doesn't matter what faith you are. It doesn't matter if your parents decided to go to the independent sector or if they decided to go to state sector. It just means children. Because children are children. But yet here we are, another government politicising children. And that is why I can't accept it. Because the minute you politicise children, you've lost the very goal, which is their welfare. Even the sausage agrees. You've lost the welfare and the best outcomes for them. Because what we should always focus on is the children. But Bridget Phillipson hasn't got a clue. Because as I said in my interview with Spencer, I am astounded that we have somebody who is the education secretary who has no idea about education or children.